Starbucks built a global empire on one promise. We're not just selling you coffee, we're giving you a place to belong. They called it the third place. It's not home, not work, but somewhere in between where you could slow down and feel a little bit more relaxed. Then, in the span of a few years, they ripped out the chairs, replaced the baristas with an app, and turned every store into a glorified pickup window. And then they wondered why sales were declining. The most dominant coffee brand in history was in free fall, and the wildest part? Nobody beat them. No competitor stole their crown. They did this to themselves. I'm Sammi Cohen, and this is Social Currency, a podcast that unpacks the stories that are shaping business, culture, and the intersection of the two. So today we are talking about the lore of Starbucks, the rise, the fall, and the latest numbers from the company that show that there might be a turnaround somewhere in the works. We're going to get into the leadership changes, 4 CEOs in 3 years. There were the employee strikes and the boycotts, but we're also going to talk about what's happening right now. The new numbers that just dropped showing that people are actually walking back into Starbucks stores for the first time in nearly 2 years. And then there's the biggest menu overhaul that they've done in years, and a viral bear cup that accidentally revealed a genius business strategy that most founders completely overlook. Stick around until the very end because I'm going to leave you with one takeaway principle that I pulled from this entire Starbucks saga that I think that every founder and business builder needs to hear. So let's get into it. So to understand the fall, you have to understand the rise. Before Starbucks, American coffee culture was basically Folgers in your kitchen and watered down diner coffee. That was really it. And then Howard Schultz came along in the late 1980s with this wild idea he picked up from Italian espresso bars. What if a coffee shop wasn't just a place to grab a drink, but a place to belong? Schultz called it the third place, and this third place concept, the coffee house, would be where community happens. A cozy spot with real chairs, warm lighting, and where the barista knows your name, and you might even strike up a conversation with a stranger. That was the vision, and it worked spectacularly well at first. Under Schultz's leadership from 1987 to 2017, Starbucks grew from 17 stores to more than 25,000. The market cap hit $78 billion. They introduced the loyalty program, they pioneered mobile ordering, and became a major coffee house in China, a country that historically preferred tea. For years, Starbucks was the gold standard in every business school textbook. Then something changed. And here's where it gets interesting. The very thing that made Starbucks successful, this third place concept that I keep talking about, is exactly what they started dismantling. When you market your store as a place to sit and stay, there's a ceiling on how many drinks you can sell per day. So inherently, the model is actually not increasing revenue in the way that modern day public companies want it to increase. So leadership made a calculation. They leaned hard into mobile ordering. They rolled out pickup-only store formats with no seating, and built an ever-growing carousel of digital coupons and rewards designed to maximize throughput. The baristas felt it immediately. Suddenly, drinks were coming in through the app, customers were walking in through the door, cars were in the drive-thru. There were 3 different channels being served by just 1 or 2 people. The expectation was 3 to 4 drinks per minute, often with complex customizations. And the job went from feeling like a craft where you got to speak to people to feeling like an assembly line. Then the pandemic hit, of course, and the third place concept as we knew it effectively disappeared overnight. Stores that were already being redesigned for speed became ghost towns, tables and chairs present but empty, counters lined with mobile orders that nobody had picked up yet. Traffic declined for the majority of months over the last 3 years, but the operational problems were only part of the story. Starbucks also found itself at the center of a cultural firestorm. Customers called for boycotts. On the labor side, things were even more heated. In late 2025, New York City ordered Starbucks to pay $39 million to more than 15,000 workers for unpredictable scheduling and denied shifts, and this was the largest worker protection settlement the city had ever seen. Unionized baristas launched the longest strike in the company's history, and even Mayor Mamdani was seen joining the picket lines. All of this was happening against a brutal economic backdrop. Inflation has been squeezing customers hard, and when your grocery bill is up, your rent is up, and tariffs are pushing prices even higher, an $8 Frappuccino starts to feel like a luxury that you just can't justify. And people didn't want to stop having coffee. They just became a lot more selective about where they spent that money. And into that gap walked competitors too. One example that I'm fascinated by is Blank Street, and this is a private equity-backed chain that started in New York City with sleek minimalist storefronts, a streamlined menu, and a membership program designed for the budget-conscious regular. Blank Street didn't try to be a third place. It didn't try to be everything to everyone. Starbucks wasn't just losing customers to apathy, it was losing them to a new generation of competitors who looked a little bit cooler, felt a little bit more authentic, and cost less. And through all of this, Starbucks cycled through its fourth CEO in 3 years. Profits fell by double digits for 4 consecutive quarters, the stock dropped a ton, and the brand that was once synonymous with aspiration started to feel like something that people were almost embarrassed to carry around. So enter Brian Niccol. If that name sounds familiar, it's because he's the guy who turned around Chipotle after their food safety crisis and revitalized Taco Bell even before that. The board brought him in with a mandate to fix the company as quickly as possible. So Niccol's plan is called Back to Starbucks, and it's essentially a return to first principles. He called the pickup-only stores overly transactional and lacking the warmth and human connection that defines our brand. Those locations are being sunsetted or shut down, and in their place, Starbucks is investing around $150,000 per store to redesign select locations in cities like New York and Los Angeles. So they're replacing hard wooden seats with plush leather, adding green walls and potted plants, bringing back the kind of atmosphere that would actually make you want to stay. Ceramic mugs are back for in-store diners, and there's even now an initiative that you've probably heard of where baristas write personal notes on your cup. And the strategy is essentially, before we try and grow, let's remember who we are. Niccol's playbook mirrors exactly what he did at Chipotle, prioritize getting customers back in the door before worrying about the margins. And here's where the plan actually seems to be working. In late January 2026, Starbucks reported that the US customer traffic rose for the first time in nearly 2 years. Customer transactions were up 3%, and this is the first increase in 8 quarters. Same-store sales rose 4%. Here's the most important detail. The average amount spent per transaction only rose modestly, which means that this wasn't driven by price hikes. More people are genuinely choosing to go back into Starbucks. And the company's CFO put it plainly, they're deliberately prioritizing traffic growth before profit recovery. Get the people back into the stores first, and then the earnings will follow. Most US locations now open at 5 a.m., and Niccol has said that store hours could expand even earlier as service speed improves. That's a signal of rising demand in the all-important morning window, because as you can imagine, most of the revenue comes in those morning hours. Once again, it's still early, and this trend line is seeming to move in the right direction for the first time in a long time. So now let's talk about what Starbucks is doing to keep that momentum going. In early February 2026, the company rolled out what's being called one of its most wide-ranging menu updates in years, including the biggest bakery refresh that they've ever done. So here's the context. Over the past year, under this Back to Starbucks plan, the company actually cut roughly a quarter of its menu items. They stripped things down, focused on speed, consistency, and execution. Now they're pivoting from simplifications to innovation. 6 new bakery items hit the stores, including globally inspired pastries like a yuzu-filled croissant, a Dubai chocolate bite, and a pistachio chocolate loaf. First, those all sound amazing. And this is a huge deal because food now accounts for about a quarter of Starbucks US sales. And there's a new everyday brewed coffee that's called 1971 Roast, which is a bold dark roast that nods to the brand's Pike Place roots. And new permanent matcha drinks were added, and there's more coming in the spring, like customizable chai, toasted coconut drinks, lavender flavors, and new energy refreshers. And they're also revamping the Starbucks Rewards program in March with new tiers and perks that are designed for repeat visits. And the strategy of everything that they're doing is clear. Give people new reasons to come back, but don't undo the operational gains that you just fought for. Now, here's one of the most fascinating parts of this whole story, and it's the thing that I want you to really sit with. You might have seen the Bearista cups, those Hello Kitty collaboration cups that Starbucks released, and they went absolutely viral. People weren't just buying them, they were reselling them at 40 to 50% markups. These cups became collector's items overnight. But that's just one piece of a much bigger play. Starbucks has been quietly deepening its ties to the fashion world too. They're sponsoring emerging designers at New York Fashion Week, brands like Sergio Hudson, and Zach Posen even designed a gown inspired by the Starbucks Starbucks Siren Green. They've launched something called the House of Coffee at their Reserve Roastery in Milan during Men's Fashion Week. And what Starbucks is doing here is really trying to reclaim their cultural relevance. In a world where Gen Z consumers are spending money on experiences and alignment with their values rather than just products, that matters enormously. So here is the final takeaway that I promised you, and I think that this is the single most important lesson from the entire Starbucks story. When Starbucks was in trouble, Brian Niccol didn't just walk in the door and launch a bunch of flashy new products. He didn't try to out-innovate the competition on day one. The first thing he did was subtract. He cut a quarter of the menu. He killed the store formats that weren't working. He went back to the core identity of the brand and asked a simple question: what made people fall in love with us in the first place? And only after that foundation was reestablished, after the operations were tighter, the stores felt better, and the traffic started actually recovering, did they start adding in new things. Most founders, when they're struggling, do the exact opposite. They panic and they add. They launch new features, new products, new campaigns, hoping that something sticks. But the Starbucks playbook says, strip it down first, get back to what you do best, earn back trust, and then, only then, start building again. If your business is in a rough patch or perhaps not growing as quickly as you would like, ask yourself, am I trying to innovate my way out of a problem that actually requires simplification? Am I adding complexity when what my customers really want is for me to go back to the basics? Sometimes the bravest move in business isn't building something new, it's having the discipline to go back to what made you great in the first place. And that is a wrap for today's episode. Let me know your thoughts about Starbucks in the comments. Do you think that they're going to make this turnaround? I want to hear from you. So thanks for listening, and I will see you back here next week. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Social Currency. Before you go, take a second to subscribe to the show wherever you're listening so you never miss an episode. And if you liked what you heard today, please rate and review the podcast. It massively helps the work I do to bring this show to life. And if you have a friend who is as obsessed with business and culture as you are, send this episode to them, because sharing the show is one of the best ways to support it. And if you want to keep up with the hottest business lore in real time, follow me on Instagram at Sammi Cohen Talks and subscribe to my newsletter, Social Currency, linked in the show notes. Social Currency is a production of Social Currency Media and Money News Network. The podcast is hosted and executive produced by me, Sammi Cohen, and produced by the Money News Network team. See you next time.